It's working. Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be top balancing big battery number 1, the Seplos BMS battery. Okay, we're currently charging. See what the BMS is doing. Yeah, 29 amps. Okay, at this rate it'll take about 3.5 hours, so we'll come back when it's done. Okay guys, we are back and the battery voltage is now 54.4 volts and we are floating at right about between 1 and 2 amps. Let's check the BMS display. So 54.43, just 1.3 amps going into the battery. Let's check out the app. All the cells are sitting around anywhere from 3.39 to 3.44. So that, not too bad of a discrepancy. It's pretty decent. No errors, no warnings, no nothing. It's actually charging pretty well. So what we're going to do is do the final top-off charge. We'll set the inverter to 55.2 volts. That should be 3.45 volts per cell. And we'll see if we can get a good top off. Okay, we should see the amps ramp up. And then it should slowly start coming down. Alright, we'll check back when this is finished. Well guys, I am not impressed. We are sitting, it's been about 20 hours now that this battery has been sitting on the charger trying to top balance. And there's 3 cells that are just hanging out there. They're hanging high. In fact, the voltage is 3.455 on those 3 cells. It's not really doing a whole lot of anything. The delta is still 111 millivolts. That's way too high. So I can't even attempt to raise the voltage on the battery until we get to like 0.010 or less. So what options do we have now? Now the Seplos BMS is a 1 amp passive balancer, and the manufacturer that sold me the box told me to keep the battery on the charger. So I've kept it on the charger for 20 hours because their reasoning is that the passive balance needs to use the charge current in order to balance the battery. I've never used passive balancing. I've never had a Seplos BMS. I've always used ZKETech BMSs, which do active balancing. So I don't know if there's any truth to that. So what I'm going to do is we're going to disconnect the charger and we're going to let it sit overnight to see if the cells balance themselves. If that doesn't work, then we're going to have to pull out some tricks. Which is really unfortunate because all the work I put into matching these cells within 1.5 amp hours of each other, I'm pretty surprised that even this balancer can't handle this task. And it makes you wonder. You know, they sell these BMSs and they can't even balance a matched set within a reasonable amount of time. I mean, it's been 20 hours. So unless they're incorrect about what they told me about keeping the charger on the pack, and that's what's causing the imbalance, and the cell's not the balance, then that's a different issue. So let's do that next. We'll disconnect the charger and we'll let it sit overnight and come back tomorrow. Well guys, we're back. And after contemplating my life decisions, I decided we would try it again. So I've had the battery disconnected for all night and all day, and I just now connected it back up to the charger. So our cell voltages are all below 3.40, which is the point at which the balancer starts balancing at 3.40 volts. And I also did a little research, and I found out that the passive balancing indeed does need to have a charge current coming in order for it to work. So we're going to do that, and I also wanted to show you one feature. This is an interesting setting, transient current. I was like, what is that for? And I was thinking about it. I was like, transient current, okay, that happens like during a CME or something. And I'm thinking, does this BMS actually have like EMP protection or something? It's very interesting. If anybody knows, let me know. Transient current. Okay, so balance. So charge equalization function is on. And there's also this, so this is when the charge is being applied to the battery, it's going to do the equalization. And also, there's this static equilibrium function. I'm not sure what that is, but I've tried it in both modes. I've had both of these turned on for like 2 days now, and I don't see any difference. But in either case, it's not going to work until the voltage gets above 3.40 volts per cell on any one cell. So let's go ahead and plug it up to the charger. We're going to set the charger for 10 amps, 54.4 volts, or 3.40 volts per cell, and we'll see if we can bump it up slowly. And let's check out our delta really quick. So our delta is actually it's 13 millivolts, so it's actually not bad. And that basically, the delta came in check pretty quick once we discharged the battery slightly. So hopefully we can get it to go this time. So we're currently charging with 10 amps on the charger, or 530 watts. Now this could be my problem because we're pushing too much current in at these high cell voltages, which get really sensitive at this point. So I might need some kind of smaller charger or power supply. I actually have one on order. 10.2 amps coming in. Yeah, I wish I could regulate that down. This may not work. Okay, so let's just monitor the cells here. Our port voltage is 54.10, so we're getting close. And we're still pushing 10 amps, so that's a little scary. Let's check out our cell voltages. Okay, 14, 15, and 16 are approaching that 3.40. Okay, now we should have a balanced start. Unfortunately, there's no good way. This is what drives me crazy about this BMS. There's no good way, unlike the JK BMS, there's no good way to see what the balancer is doing, or if it's even on. You should just put that in here, you know, just some indicator that shows that the balancer is actually working. Guys, I don't get why they supposedly this is a nice BMS, but they put just a small passive balancer on this thing, and it just can't handle these cells. So this is interesting. There's two voltages you see here, right? There's the battery icon in the little picture of the battery. It says 54.4. That's the pack voltage. And then it says port voltage, that's an actually cool feature because that's the voltage that the charger is actually putting out. So if you had comms hooked up, if you had the CAN or RS-45 hooked up to your inverter, the port voltage would be reflective of your inverter output voltage, and the pack voltage is up here on the battery, of course. So that's kind of cool. The charge current, okay, good. The charge current's coming down. We're at 3.14 amps. That's good. RTFM. So I think I figured out a couple things by looking at the manual and comparing it with the settings in the app on the BMS. One thing I figured out is the BMS should actually be able to balance when the charger is charging or when it's in standby mode, no charger connected. So it should be able to do both according to the documentation. What I want to do is compare the manual against the settings in the BMS. So the first thing we're going to come to is, okay, right here, cell equalization. Equalization active condition. Active voltage 3.35 volts. So they actually have it set to 3.40, which is good. That's typically where I like the balancer to start balancing. And the delta has to be greater than 30 millivolts. So we'll go down here, balance, equalization open pressure difference. So the delta basically is 30 millivolts. That's when it starts. And it stops at 20 millivolts. So there's not a huge range there. So our cell voltages are sitting at, we have several cells that are way above 3.40. These number 14, 15, 16 at 3.459. So the balancer should be working according to these settings. So here's something else about the standby. So standby equalization on. When there's no charging and discharging current flow, the standby equalization will be activated. Standby time, 10 hours. You know what? That just occurred to me. Does that mean it waits 10 hours to start? Or does it balance for 10 hours? If it waits for 10 hours, then holy crap, that means we've only had like 5 hours of balancing, actual balancing. Let's go change that. So this 10 hours, we're going to change that to just 1. I wish I could do 0. Well, can you do 0? Save. Also, there's the cell invalidation. If the delta gets so out of whack, right, 500 millivolts or half a volt, then it just shuts down. So it gets too screwed up. I can't fix it. Sorry. User intervention required, right? So this is where we can also see it's more evidence of the balancer being able to balance both in standby mode and in charging mode. So BMS could balance. The BMS can balance individual cell and at standby and charging mode through power consumption circuit. When any individual cell voltage is higher than the equalization start voltage, right, 3.40, that's what the start voltage is, and the voltage difference, the delta, exceeds the threshold, which is 30 milliamps, the equalization circuit flows. So it should be working. The equalization start voltage threshold is configurable. Okay, but this is contradictory right here. When connected, the charger or voltage difference lower than setting threshold, equalization stops. What? When connected with charger, equalization stops. That makes no sense. That's contradictory, right? Because it's right here it's saying, okay, you can do it in standby or charging. But then down here it says when connecting with charger. Hopefully it's just bad English. We'll just skip that. Alright, well that's all I really found. So this should be working. We're gonna wait. Well, it said 0 hours. So you know what? We're going to come back in 20 minutes and see where the cell voltages are. Alright. Okay, well, it's the next morning and I think it's working. Very slow, extremely slow, but I think it's working. You can see our min voltage is 3.383 and the max is 3.340. So that gives us a deviation of just 43 milliamps. That's down from 108 milliamps last night. So that's pretty good. It couldn't go all the way because once the cells drop below 3.40, the balancer stops working on them. So when it's charging on the charge balance, I think my charger is just pushing too much current. So we're going to try again to get to 54.4 or 3.40 volts per cell, and then we'll check the delta. If it's good, we'll try to push it up to 55.2. So it's been on the charger for like 10 minutes, just 10 minutes. And already it's going into the intermittent charging again. Standby, charge, standby, charge. And the delta just, on those 14, 15, 16 cells, right? It just shot right back up, 3.469, 3.70. So if I did try to push it higher, it would probably just go into protection mode. So I don't know. I'm not really getting anywhere with this. This is really frustrating. Well, let's just leave it on the charger for another 10 hours, 6 hours, and see if it can actually get these cells in check while it's in the charge balance mode. Okay guys, so check this out. This is crazy. So we're sitting at 54.4 volts, and the delta when I came back after about 5 hours was over 100. It was about 116. And the warn light, or the warn indicator on the battery was on. So it wasn't a shutdown, but it was a warning. So the same thing I observed with the cells. The 14, 15, and 16 were still too high. So the balancer is unable to bring these cells down, so I figured I'm gonna hook up Big Blue and manually bring these cells down to see if I can manually balance those 3 cells. So I actually did it, and then the cells are actually maintaining at 3.42 volts now. So just to show you what we did, I'm gonna bring this cell up, this low one, 3.358. We're gonna bring it up to about 3.40. And currently the delta is sitting at just 74, so it's still a little high, but not that great. So let's see if we can get it down to about 50 to 60 before we start pushing up to 55.2 volts. But here, check this out. We have Big Blue connected to cell number 3 here, and we're getting a voltage of 3.397 on the screen, but it's 3.357 on the BMS. So a little bit of extra voltage coming in probably from the nearby cells. Let's go ahead and boost this up. Now let's watch cell number 3. Okay, there it is, 3.61. We're manually balancing these cells. This is crazy. Okay, now 4. Now cell number 4 is actually the low cell now. So number 3 is no longer the lagger. Okay, so it looks like that manual manipulation of those 3 cells, boosting those cells up, actually got our delta down to 54 millivolts. It actually worked. This is crazy. We actually have to manually balance this pack. This is ridiculous. So look, what we're going to do now is try to boost the voltage up to 55.2, and let's see if we can get somewhat of a top balance. Ooh, we're getting really close to 3.50 on number 16. But look at that, no warn. 55.2 right there. Now the amperage should start coming up. There it is, starts coming down. If we can hold this without going into warn, then I guess I'll be satisfied. Look at that, sound of 14, 15, very close. So close to the warn voltage. Let's see, and we're still good. No warn. So we're looking good. All the cells are below 3.50. So it's been about 6 months since I filmed that video, and this battery has been working perfectly all summer long, no issues. In fact, the state of charge is so good on this battery, on the BMS rather, that I keep this laptop up and open and running all the time so I can quickly check the state of charge of the entire battery bank instead of looking at the shunt. In my opinion, the Seplos BMS was never intended for the DIY market. It's made for like a commercially installed, retail installed BMS. If you just look at it, it's got a very crude, it's just a circuit board. There's no finished cover on it. It's not nice looking. And it's got a small balancer. It's just a maintenance balancer. So it's there to just maintain the cells, not necessarily to do any top balancing. If you do decide to buy the Seplos BMS, you definitely want to buy either a power supply, something like this, or a battery balancer, something like this. And that'll help to get that initial top balance done a lot quicker, because you'll be waiting. Remember, I matched these cells. If you haven't seen that video, I had 32 cells and I tested all of them, capacity tested, and I hand picked the ones that were matched with capacity, so within 1.5 amp hours of each other. So that's not a difficult job for a BMS, or at least it shouldn't be. And it still took several days to balance. Imagine using regular cells that are just picked at random. They have about a 4 amp hour difference. That's what you're going to get in the pack with just randomly picked cells. That could take a couple weeks to balance with just that passive 250 milliamp balancer. So definitely get a active balancer module or a power supply. So in the video, the app will not show the BMS balancer actually working. You cannot see anywhere. There's no indicator that it's actually working. The cells are not flashing. You can't tell. But if you install the PC software and you connect the battery to the PC, you can actually see that status in the PC software. You'll see the batteries, the cells flashing. You're knowing that it's actually working. So definitely install the PC software if you're going to be using this BMS. Okay, Seplos versus JK inverter BMS. These are my opinions based on about 6 months worth of usage. So the balancer, obviously the JK BMS has a 2 amp active balancer, so it definitely helps out when you're building a new pack and you're wanting to get that initial top balance and you're wanting to get it done fast. The Seplos has just a 250 milliamp passive balancer and it is very, very, very slow. In fact, I thought it was not even working. That's the biggest downfall, I think, of this BMS. Okay, state of charge. So the Seplos definitely has a superior state of charge accuracy. It has internal and external voltage readings, so it can more accurately monitor the state of charge, and it just works. Okay, the JK BMS at the time of recording this video has absolutely terrible state of charge. I can't believe it's so bad. The past BMSs worked great. The longer you run the JK BMS, the worse it gets. But they have solved this apparently with the latest firmware update. So definitely make sure you update the firmware if you're using the JK BMS to get the state of charge fixed. Another feature that it has to help with the state of charge is it has a parameter for rated capacity and also actual capacity. And I think what they use this for is as the battery derates over time. Let's say it's 280 amp hours when you buy the cells and they're nice and fresh. As it derates over time, you can go in there and derate that rated value so that it can calculate the difference between the rated and the actual and get a more accurate state of charge. The display on the front of the battery for the Seplos is pretty basic. In fact, it's not very easy to use. If you want to look at the individual cells, you have to go into the menu and then you have to scroll down because it only will display like 4 cells at a time. You can't see all 16 cells on the screen at one time. And it's lacking of information. It doesn't show you a lot of the information that the JK does. So the JK has a nice 4.3 inch screen. It's the touch screen and it's a very nice layout. It's easy to read. It's just definitely superior. So definitely I like the JK when it comes to the screen. Okay, the software, I would say the JK has, the software is about the same. The thing is with the JK, the app is available for download in the App Store versus just installing like a manual APK file. So with the Seplos, you have to install a manual APK file. It's not in the App Store that I can see. So it's a little more technical, but it's not that hard, but still, I would say they're about the same. But the JK, you can actually update the firmware, where the Seplos, I don't think you can. Okay, protection. I can say the Seplos definitely wins in this category. Both BMSs protect the battery perfectly fine. They cover the basic 6 parameters. I'm not going to name them all, but it's like over voltage, under voltage, over current, over temp, under temp. Those basic parameters exist in both BMS and they both work fine. But the Seplos monitor the cell level voltages and the battery pack level voltages as well, and it monitors practically a million other things. That's kind of annoying when you get in there and start configuring the thing. So yeah, definitely wins on the safety, if you want to call it safety, on the protection category. Okay, comms. Well, unfortunately, I don't have any experience with the comms on either BMS because I haven't hooked them up to my inverters or tried yet. But what I've seen on different videos, specifically Andy's off-grid garage, I think they have about similar level of comm support. But I would argue with the Seplos, it would support a wider range of inverters. There's actually a list, at least in the BMS app, there's a list of inverters that you could select from. I don't know, I haven't seen that list on JK, but yeah, so definitely take a look at Andy's off-grid garage channel for more information on comms and how to hook it up specifically to Victron system. I'll also include a link to the BMS Comparison spreadsheet that he created. Okay, so my overall thoughts are, I would go with the JK BMS. The most frustrating part of building a battery, I think, is top balancing it. That's what takes the most time, and it can be rather annoying. So unless you plan to get a active balancer module with the Seplos BMS, I would just go with the JK, save yourself a lot of frustration, and just go with the JK BMS. But the Seplos is well intended, and it is a well-designed BMS. If they would have just bumped up the balancer, and supposedly the newer version, the V3, has a 1 amp, I think it's still passive, but it has a 1 amp balancer in it, so it would knock that initial top balance time dramatically down. But according to Andy's video, I don't think it was working very well, so definitely one of these. So yeah, if you just want to, if you're going to be building a lot of batteries, just stick with the JK and I think you'll be a lot happier. Okay, that's it for this video. I'll put links for the power supply and the active balancer modules in the description below, as well as the comparison Excel spreadsheet that Andy made on the BMSs. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.